Welcome back everyone to 3D modeling a Hobbit door scene with Blender 2.9 and Adobe Photoshop, and this is where we left it off. So now we need to actually work on our glass. So what we're going to do is I'm going to press the question mark just to bring in our plane, and it's not coming in, so I'm going to press Alt H, and there we go, now I've brought it in. And let's now work on our actual glass. So first of all though, we know that if we click on this now, we can't do anything with this until we've actually unwrapped it. Now, the other thing to take into account here is that these, so if I click on this one, for instance, you can see if I come in actually and put it on, let's put it on vertex select. Now, at the moment, you can see all these vertices going around here, and each one of these vertices represents an edge. In other words, this actual whole panel here is an n-gon. In other words, it's got more than 3 sides, which is a triangle, or 4 sides, which is a quad. Now, normally that is bad. It's not actually good having meshes with more than 4 sides. The reason for that is if you take this into something like Unreal Engine or something like that, the light will not bounce off it correctly. So there are ways actually to fix this very, very fast. Sometimes, however, as well, you might want to leave them like this. It keeps the polygon count low. If you're just doing a scene out in Blender, it should be fine. Sometimes the light will be messed around with a little bit, and sometimes it works fine. Normally on something that's a flat plane like this, it should be absolutely fine. Now, the other thing is, of course, why you're keeping the polygon count low is if you've got a machine that doesn't work very well at high polygon counts, in other words, it's a low-end machine, a laptop, something like that, then you might not actually want to convert this into quads. I think I will convert it though, just so it's done right. So the easy way to do this is to grab everything, hover over it, right click, make sure that you're on face select, right click, come down and triangulate faces. And then right click again. And then what we're going to do is tries to quads, and you'll end up with something like this, which looks a lot more messy, but at the end now, this is actually a much, much better mesh than all those n-gons. So now we've got that, what we need to do is we need to actually unwrap it. So again, over to our UV editing, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to click U, unwrap, and unwrap them all. Now we did already unwrap those, but now we've just cleaned them up, and now we're actually ready to actually bring in our glass. Now the thing is, if we go back to shading now, click on it, press tab, we can see that these are split up. So if I grab one of them, press the L button, you can see that I can pick these individually. In other words, they're all individual islands, and that's exactly what I want for the next part of creating the materials, because I need them all islands so I can actually create the procedural material, which makes the glass a little bit of a shade different depending on which island they are. So that's exactly why we're doing that. Okay, so let's create our stained glass material for our kind of sky, and we want this a blue color. So let's come over again to our materials panel, click the plus, and we're going to click new. I'm going to double click it. I'm going to rename it to stained glass blue, like so. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to come now to my shading panel here, and I said that this was a supernode, this principled, but on this occasion we're going to simply click on it and click delete, and it will go black, but don't worry about that. Alright, so let's build this next material. So the first thing is we're going to need a geometry mode node to tell Blender where each of these islands are. So the other thing is at the moment, as you can see, this is actual black. So what we'll do is we'll come over here, Shift A, and I'm going to do a search, and I'm going to put in geometry. So GEO, geometry, and there is our geometry node. Next, I'm going to bring in a actual color ramp. So Shift A, search, color, and come around to color ramp, like so. Next, I'm going to bring in a hue and saturation, and the reason I'm bringing that in is because then it will give us an ability to kind of saturate the colors out if they're a little bit too bright. So hover over here, Shift A, search, hue and saturation, bring that in. Next, we want to bring in the actual shader. So what type of shader is it? Well, of course, it's going to be glass, so let's bring that in. So Shift A, and you'll notice you can come down and actually be an option here that says shaders, and you can see all these different types of shaders. I recommend actually playing around with these. They're pretty fun to actually learn what they all are, but the one we want is the glass BSDF, so let's bring that in. Now let's join these all up. So we said random per island. Let's plug that in there. Let's then plug in the color. to the color of the hue and saturation. Let's plug the color from there into the glass. And finally, let's plug in the glass to the surface of the material output. And this is what will happen at the moment. And the reason is because we haven't really got any colors in here at the moment. Now, the other thing is we need to put this onto our Cycles shader, viewport shading, because I've noticed that there's a little bug on Blender, and in Eevee you can't really see what this is actually doing. In other words, the random per island doesn't work in Eevee. So if I come down and put this on Cycles, and you can see now that we've got all these different shades of colors based on the island. So you can see this one's much darker than this one, and it's all done automatically, and that is exactly what we want. Now if I put this on Eevee, you'll see it's all black, and that is what I'm talking about. So let's put it on Cycles just so we can see what we're doing. And again, if you want to turn this down to something like 10, it's going to make it much easier to kind of turn around and see what you're doing. I'm going to have mine on 32. My computer should be able to handle that. But if you're struggling, just put this down a little bit. Next, now we need to actually make this look like stained glass. So let's do that now. So again, we'll bring in a kind of noise texture, and we're going to bring in a Musgrave. So MUS, Musgrave texture. And we need a node to plug it into the displacement. In other words, to displace all of this glass. And you can see at the moment it's gone a bit funky. So let's bring in a displacement. So Shift A, search, displacement, bring it in. And now let's plug the displacement in. And let's plug the Musgrave into the height of the displacement. Okay, so something like that. In a moment, it's going very, very funky. Like I said, let's just see if I can get that to go right. So I'm just going to put it back on. There we go. Now it's looking much better. Don't know why it went like that. And you can see the Musgrave on here is starting to act on this actual glass. So now let's come in and turn the scale of the Musgrave up to 225, like so. And now you can see we're actually starting to get something. You can really see that it's actually starting to really look like stained glass, and you'll see this more as we bring in a color. So let's have a look what else we need to change. And the only thing I would say is turn down the I can't even read what that says, but turn this down to 1, and that should bring it out a little bit more. Now let's mess around with this color. So we said we needed blue. So let's first of all come up to where it says RGB, and what we're going to do, we're going to put that on HSV. And we're going to put this on near. So just make sure this is on near. And now finally, let's change this color. So we're going to grab this one here. So click on this little arrow here. Click on the color bar here. And let's bring that up. And we're going to put it on blue. And now you'll see that we already have something happening. Now, the thing is, it's going from blue to purple to white. And we don't really want that. So let's change this color as well to probably a darker blue or something like that. So let's bring it down a little bit different. Something like that. And you can see now we've got a lot of different variations of that actual blue, and that is exactly what we want. The one thing I would say is I think I want this probably, yeah, I'm just looking at what kind of sky blue I actually want it. So maybe that, and then let's turn this one. Let's have a look. And don't forget, we can saturate this out. So I'm going to actually put it on that there for now. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to come to my saturation and just have a look how much I want to saturate this out. And as well, when we actually render this out, we might actually, again, have to mess around with this just to get it how we want it. I'm also going to turn this value down just a little bit just to make it more obvious what the variant is. And then apart from that, everything should be fine on there. Now let's turn up the roughness of the actual glass to 0.275. And then the IOR should stay on 1.450. 1.450 is basically what it should be on to make this actually look like glass. In other words, to make it see-through and things like that. Okay, so the only other thing left to do now is to actually come over and make sure that we've got this on screen space reflection so we can see our glass. So let's put this on Eevee for 1 second. We'll come down now to where it says screen space reflection, turn that on, open this up. Refraction on, half res tracing off, and then finally now let's come to our material, and you'll see when you click on material, if you come down, you've got an option here that says screen space reflection. and let's turn that on. And now what I want to do is I want to actually bring in something to put behind here to make sure that this glass is actually see-through. So the way I'm going to do that is I'm just going to zoom out a little minute. I'm going to bring in a cube, so Shift A, bring in a cube, make it smaller, 7 on the number pad, Shift Space to bring in my move tool, and let's now move it back like so. And now I'm looking to see if I can actually see this cube. And at the moment, as you can see, I can't see this cube. So let's actually work on actually seeing this. So the mid-level of our displacement, let's turn that up to 18, like so. And let's turn the scale down to near enough, quite far down. And now you can see, if I turn this down, look all the way, you can see that we can see through the glass. So we want this very, very low. So 0.001, like so. And now you can see through the actual glass, but not enough to really see the cube. And that is exactly what we're wanting. So now let's come over again to our little computer box, Eevee, back on Cycles, and there you go. That is the actual look we're actually looking for. So there we go. That is our first material actually set up. And of course, what we're going to do now is we're going to add a few more materials. I'm going to make it easy though. We are actually going to copy them just to finish this actual glass off. So I hope you enjoyed that, and I hope you were learning a lot, and I hope to see you on the next one. Thanks a lot, everyone. Bye-bye.